Moving on to our next guest, we'll do our best in due diligence, factual reporting, and in the ethics of journalism to address the issues that be in a holds-bars conversation, one that refrains from using inflammatory words or being inciting in our approach to the issues in the news. But at this point in time, let's look to connect to our next guest, the Executive Director, Advocacy Centre, Dr. Fyneface. Doctor, good morning to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning to you. Nice to join you on the program this morning, all the way from Port Harcourt.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you join us from Port Harcourt, the Garden City, in a state where all eyes are in Nigeria. Let's first of all get the feel. We hear there's increased security presence on the streets, but what are the people of Port Harcourt and by extension River State saying in reactions to the latest development?
Yeah, I think the people of River State and, of course, Port Harcourt, where we have as a center of the political action, are all condemning what has happened. A lot of people never really realize what has happened, but they are now beginning to see that what has happened is like we are in the military regime right now because the entire streets are taken over by security. A lot of checkpoints have increased. A lot of searches on the streets. If you are driving, you have to park, they search you before you pass. A lot of those things are happening. And the presidency have also confirmed that they have deployed about 10,000 troops, into River State and its environs to ensure the protection of, oil infrastructure, following the blasting of, oil facility that was reported, which Mr. President read in his speech. So we are beginning to see a lot of these things, even on the night when the state of emergency was declared by Mr. President. Immediately, Mr. President made the pronouncement. There was increase of security presence. A lot of security vans and vehicles were driving towards the government house, and they took over the government house, the entire area. So a lot of these things happen, and it is expected because emergency rule has been declared. A lot of laws have been relaxed, and a lot of procedures in doing things are suspended. So it's just like a military rule. In political science, we refer to things like this, like a diarchy, where you have, a military head, and then you have a civilian working with that person in a particular, a setup. So that is what you have. So the people of Port Harcourt are beginning to realize what has happened. They are beginning to speak out about it. They are beginning to share their opinion, and they are beginning to see that what has happened is not what is expected at this point in time, especially in a democracy, when we expected Mr. President to look at certain approaches that he will use to address the issues. But then I believe that the days ahead is going to bring out a lot of things that Mr. President will begin to realize that those who guided him to make the pronouncement of a state of emergency in River State never really guided him well. From what Mr. President said, hammering more on security issue, this and that, it meant clearly that the National Security Advisor is behind everything that has happened. And you remember, the National Security Advisor had not too long ago had a meeting with even some Ogoni leaders, and is in charge of addressing the issue of the resumption of oil production in Ogoni land. So it's like everything in River State, he is working with the FCT minister allegedly to ensure that everything goes well in River State. So if you look at the script that Mr. President read out, you will see that some of the accusations that the State Assembly leveled against the governor as part of the impeachment notice that was served on him, we are part of what Mr. President read. And if you look at what Mr. President read in the state of emergency speech broadcast to the nation, you will see that everything was being blamed on the governor. Nobody really tried to look at the angle that the assembly, how they were playing and frustrating the governor from being able to implement the Supreme Court judgment. So everything you are seeing here is a script. But I am happy that we are in a democracy. Not when Mr. President made a statement like this, a declaration like that, everything ends there and we have to obey. We now have a National Assembly representing the people and charged with the responsibility of ratifying Mr. President's action and speech. So all eyes are now not only on River State, but on the National Assembly, which comprised of the Senate and the House of Reps. We are watching. I think they are sitting over here today. We are watching.
Dr. Fyneface,
if they are going to ratify Mr. President's speech and then approve the 6 months emergency rule in River State. We are all watching and to see what is going to happen. And you also recall that the River State allocation was withheld.
Dr. Fyneface,
and having withheld that allocation,
just a moment, Dr. Fyneface,
be released. And I don't know whether it is not against Supreme Court judgment.
Dr. Fyneface, salient points you have raised, but I'll ask you the first one based on your reference to the National Assembly. Whilst yesterday during plenary, both chambers failed to deliberate on the issue, the Senate stood it down for debate today. In the Green Chambers, they failed to reach quorum with the required majority to decide on it. But yet, shortly afterwards, we saw the swearing-in ceremony and oath-taking of the administrator, the ex-naval chief, Rear Admiral Ibokete Ibas, retired. Many are asking questions on the procedural events in reaching such declarations before an oath-taking ceremony. Do you think the National Assembly's decision should come first, or it doesn't matter that the oath-taking ceremony has now taken place?
Yeah, I think I will say it doesn't matter where the oath ceremony has taken place. It doesn't matter because it's a follow-up to presidential pronouncement. But even if the oath-taking ceremony has taken place, it doesn't forestall the National Assembly from carrying out their duty or their function. Remember, the sitting governor that was elected in Rivers State, just in office now, barely about 2 years in office, he's been asked to step aside as against what the law provides in Section 305 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, which is the ground norm, and what Mr. President cited while making that declaration. So even if the swearing-in ceremony has taken place, and of course we are expecting the sole administration in Rivers State today, and we are expecting a statewide broadcast from him, and he could take over those places because nature abhors vacuum. He should come in, sit in, start his job, let the National Assembly make their pronouncement after deliberation today. If what comes out of the National Assembly is the rejection of the emergency rule in Rivers State, there is next available flights at the Port Harcourt International Airport domestic wing that is going to take, and is back to Abuja. So nothing is fundamentally wrong by way of him being sworn in while the National Assembly is about to take a decision. But I am sure that it will be difficult for the National Assembly to have the quorum that is required. Out of the 109 senators, 74 of them are required to take that action. And out of the 360 House of Reps members, 240 of them are required to form a quorum to be able to ratify the decision of Mr. President. The outcry I've seen across the country today, I can authoritatively tell you that it's going to be difficult for the National Assembly to ratify the position of Mr. President. And as we speak, I know that a lot of lobbying are going on for Mr. President not to be disgraced by virtue of them rejecting the emergency rule. So they are going to look at a win-win situation, and a situation whereby they will arrive at a point that both parties will not be disgraced in the public view, because the focus is on Rivers State, focus on Mr. President, and currently on the National Assembly. And the international community is watching, because we are in a democracy. We are not in a military rule.
Now, on the point of the Supreme Court judgment suspending payments of allocations from the Federation account to Rivers State, a lot of persons had criticized this move, but with the hopes of the resumption, much like you said, of the administrator today, there are also speculations that this Supreme Court judgment might be set aside. Let's get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. I can say in a way that the Supreme Court judgment may likely be set aside because we are in an emergency right now by virtue of that pronouncement. But I also thought that I also think that by the other pronouncement by the Supreme Court prior to the judgment that is causing this crisis now by virtue of them accusing the governor of not implementing it, the Supreme Court has said that by virtue of the local government areas not having elected council chairmen, that allocation from the federation account should not be released to them. And if that is the case, the appointment of an administrator for Rivers State means that what we have in place in Rivers State is not a democratically elected governor. And if that is the case, I think the Supreme Court judgment that withholds allocation from a council that doesn't have a democratically elected local government chairman should also apply. And the allocation should not be released. If Mr. President has made a pronouncement of emergency, there should also be an emergency dipping of hand into the federation account, into the purse of the presidency to release money for the running of Rivers State, pending when the issue is resolved in 6 months or 3 months, and the National Assembly will ratify, and the Rivers allocation released to a democratically elected governor in Rivers State to spend on the people. So all of this information is going out that approval has been given for that money to be given to the sole administrator. Why I do not see why that should happen. I still believe that Mr. President should not, also in the process of accusing a governor of not implementing the Supreme Court judgment leading to the crisis, also be part of the process of not making the pronouncement of the Supreme Court, which is final as far as the country is concerned, to also be eroded or violated. So I think Mr. President should look inwards, ensure that the rivers allocation is not released to the sole administrator, deep hand into the federation account from the purse of the federal government, and fund the operation of the sole administrator for the next 6 months in Rivers State. While he was governor of Lagos State, there was the seizure of local government allocation to his state by former President Obasanjo. He was dipping hand into the purse of the Lagos State government to fund those 22 or thereabouts 20 developing areas that he created. He should also be able to run that. As we speak, Bayelsa State has also created some of those areas where people who are elected but not recognized by the constitution are running, and they are dipping into their purses to run it. That is what should also happen in this case. Let Mr. President dip into the federal executive accounts to fund the sole administrator in Rivers State and not release the Rivers State allocation that was withheld because of breaches to constitutional practices and Supreme Court judgments to a sole administrator that is not democratically elected by the people of Rivers State.
Now let's talk about allegations leveled against Governor Siminalayi Fubara. I don't know if you listened to the address by the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, where he said that the governor teleguided militants to bomb the installations, thereby saying that the federal government is indicting Governor Fubara in the oil pipeline bombings. What do you make of these indictments and allegations leveled against him?
Yeah, I think that indictment, I listened to the Attorney General spoke, and when he spoke and mentioned some of those things, in a way, I blame Governor Sim, because when he made that statement, it was an event where he was inaugurating something in Rivers State. He made that statement, whereby at that time the youth were hailing him while he was speaking. And he made a comment to the youth not to worry, that very soon they are going to get instruction. I said, no, you don't do so. I was on Today FM 95.1 Port Harcourt speaking about this to say the governor should not have said that. He should withdraw that comment, because if anything happens, it will be blamed on him. And that is what has practically happened right now. Because when the first vandalism on the pipeline happened in the Ogoni area, I made it clear in the media to look, Ogoni people are not at war with the warring parties in relation to the political crisis in Rivers State. Ogonis are at peace with the Kalabari people, they are at peace with the Kwere people, they are at peace with the Ijaw people. So there is no how anything that has to do with militancy threatening to vandalize pipeline, if they attempt to impeach him, will happen on Ogoni soil. That will not be it. And I still stand by that. That what happened in Ogoni soil has nothing to do with the political crisis in Rivers State and should not be blamed on Sim or blamed on the militant that threatened to vandalize pipeline. But the second vandalism and explosion that happened in the Egbamando local government area, I can allegedly say that may be related to the threat that we heard from those militants in the creek, which Mr. President read both in his speech. So all of this put together, I will say that in a way, Mr. President have made that pronouncement. The Attorney General have also said that the governor made that speech, but he never retracted it. Those who advised him, I don't know why they didn't advise him to retract the statement, because whatever is being done now is being premised on that statement, and that is why the security architecture of Mr. President through the National Security Advisor has allegedly picked that statement as the basis to declare state of emergency in Rivers State, because they said the governor failed to counter what those boys said when they said they were going to vandalize pipeline, and that no leader of Rivers State said anything about it. For that reason, he's being held responsible for making statement that incited or mobilized the boys into the creek to vandalize the pipeline. But I think why this may not be the case, because that statement was made, to an extent you may want to put it on the governor, but that is not still enough to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State. What would have been done in essence is to leave the governor in place like we had in the Bay States, talking about Bronu, Adamawa and Yobe, when former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan declared emergency. The governor would have been there, while the current 10,000 troops being deployed would have been deployed into Rivers State to work with the governor that should fund the security from the state allocation received to ensure that they protect the oil facilities and ensure that law and order is being put in place in Rivers State to ensure that further incidents do not happen. So what currently happened, whereby they sacked a democratically elected governor and state assembly, is uncalled for and unnecessary. And I'm calling on the National Assembly to reject that position of Mr. President, because we are in a democracy and not in a military regime.
Now, Mr. Fyneface, this opposition has also been greeted by support from the NBA, the Nigerian Labour Congress, TUC, PDP governors, and much alike the Ijaw youths, who before this declaration were made, we saw the Ijaw Youth Council more or less barricade or block the east-west road in demonstrations. I don't know if you see an alignment in all these calls that are requesting that the president reverts to status quo in his suspension of the executive and legislative arms of government in Rivers.
Definitely, the Ijaw youths, like every other Rivers youths, a lot of people are not happy with what is happening in Rivers State. The barricading of the East-West Road was a peaceful demonstration by the Ijaw youths, and it is a constitutional right of the people to demonstrate, to air their views on issues they do not agree with. And what were their issues? To say that don't impeach the governor, he has done nothing wrong and stuff like that. While some of those things may be sentiment of those who have come out on the street to protest, it is still subject to legal processes that it should undergo before it happens. So it should not even be seen as a reason, because we do not expect a situation whereby a governor, a sitting governor that we were all in our houses, the FCT minister brought him forward, supported him, bought form for him, campaigned for him, did everything he could do, made him governor, and then stepped aside. You don't expect us to reject him. He has presented the governor to all. We have accepted him to work with him. So the same person now allegedly working against him, you don't expect other people who are already enjoying his way of leadership, the way he speaks, the way he interacts, the developmental style and everything, to all keep quiet and allow him to be impeached. People must come out to speak out. Demonstration on the streets is just like what we are also doing in the media. We talk about these issues, things we don't like, we talk about it, and then the policymakers should pick what we have said, implement it to ensure that we have an egalitarian society that is democratically viable and that people can copy from. Because today, the world is watching Nigeria, and as Nigeria is being ridiculed by this particular action. So I think those demonstrations by those youths were not out of place and never should have been part of any reason why we should have a state of emergency declared in Rivers State for 6 months. I think it's beyond what we should expect in a democratic regime. Remember, before Nigeria returned to democracy in 1999, Mr. President was among those on the street demonstrating for the military to go, condemning their principles and practices. But now Mr. President is sitting in Aso Rock, based on his call of Emilokan that this is my turn. He has now gotten his turn. What are we getting out of Mr. President's turn? Let Mr. President ensure that those practices that he condemned while he was on the street, civilian like me, in the 1990s, should not repeat now that he is sitting down in office as the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Now, you also mentioned the FCT minister, a godfather to Governor Siminalayi Fubara. On his role in all of this, he is being fingered, allegedly, as the mastermind. But the AGF somewhat absolved him of a role in all of this. And when he was asked by State House correspondents if the FCT minister should intervene in resolving these issues, owing to the fact that he is Governor Fubara's godfather, he says that is at the purview of the FCT minister. But coming from you, a Rivers indigene, what would you suggest the FCT minister does in this case? Is it a situation beyond repair? Has this relationship been fractured in a way that he no longer wants to see his godson?
Yeah, I think the relationship has properly been fractured because the FCT minister sat back, look at all he did for the sitting governor, and maybe he felt he is not getting what he expected to get from it. Because you cannot tell me that a godfather will install a godson as the governor of a state without certain agreements, even if those agreements were privileges and not right, and they were not backed by law. There were some agreements that they had. Maybe the sitting governor is no longer dancing according to the tune of Mr. FCT minister, and that is why you are having all of this. But to this extent, I believe that he can still step into the picture. And how he can step into the picture at this point in time, if he really wants to resolve the issue, is to speak to his boys at the State Assembly. Because the FCT minister has those assembly members loyal to him. And if they are loyal to him, I believe strongly that one way or the other, they are consulting him for the action they are taking allegedly. And if all of these are happening and he wants to address the issue, I believe he can address it. But to a very large extent, the assembly members and all those who are against the governor are all bent on impeaching him. Remember on October 30, 2023, when this saga started, the key thing was that they went straight to try to impeach him. And when that process failed, that is what we are seeing till today. And this is going to continue till 2027. It's not going to stop. But I still believe that what we now have in place is the Supreme Court judgment, and that should be holistically implemented, because we do not have a Supreme Court of Appeal. whatever the Supreme Court have said cannot be appealed. So it should be implemented by the governor and all parties involved in this to the letter. But a situation whereby the governor wants to present the budget to the State Assembly as directed by the Supreme Court, and they are evading that process, is something that I think they are frustrating him from being able to, carry out the Supreme Court instruction and judgment. So I think they should cooperate with him to ensure he presents the budget. How will they not now feel when the governor would have presented the budget, and as a result of that, the allocation is released to Rivers State, which they will even benefit from and use part of the money to even carry out the impeachment process they want to carry out. But now it has been released to a sole administrator that is not even from Rivers State to manage without accountability. So how are they going to feel wherever they are? So I think they should ensure they work together. The FCT minister knows where to come in. But I know with the 8-point agenda that Mr. President, the FCT minister, and the governor met and put together, that they accuse the governor of not holistically implementing, will be the reason why the FCT minister may not want to do anything. Remember, in his recent media parley in Abuja, he did say that even if the governor is impeached, that heaven will not fall. So all of these things are in place, and it meant that the former governor of Rivers and FCT minister is very embittered against the governor, and he does not want him to remain in office in the next 1 minute. So every step that he could legitimately take for him to leave office, he might want to do it. But I still think that father and son relationship is still there. Remember, the governor calls him my oga. So my oga and my son, they can actually be able to come together to address the issue in the interest of Rivers people. Because when two elephants fight, like we always say, it is the grass that suffer. It is the Rivers people that are suffering in this case. Not Governor Sim Fubara, not the FCT minister, that their children and themselves will never be hungry again throughout their lifetime. But the Rivers people, the pensioners, the people on gratuity, our elder statesmen that are waiting for their money every 30 days, will be able to buy drugs and take care of themselves, but they may not get it now because of what is happening. They are the people that are suffering out of all of this, because as we speak in Rivers State, politics has taken over, governance has gone off, and when governance is not in place, the people cannot have dividends of democracy, and this is where the people are suffering.
Well, Dr. Fyneface, it is indeed a fine place to leave it. We thank you for the salient points raised and your advocacy in that respect. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Dr. Fyneface joining us virtually from Port Harcourt, bringing us up to speed about the increased security presence on the streets of Port Harcourt and the need for governance to be restored to the people. Like he said in his closing statement, when politics comes to play, governance goes to rest. And when governance goes to rest, the people suffer. Well, this is as much as time will permit for us to discuss the issue as it concerns Rivers' emergency rule. But remember, you can re-watch this episode on our YouTube channel at ADBN TV_NG. My name is Beat O'Brien, thanking you for being a part of the program this morning.